Okay, let's open up the Gemara in Yevamos. And we're on Lamed Zayin Amud Beis. So let's see if we can find the place. We had a machlokes yesterday about Kam Dina or Hadar Dina. So that's approximately 12 lines up from the bottom. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. I think, Don, you counted it yesterday. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11 lines up from the bottom. So we had a machlokes yesterday between Rabbi Abba in the name of Rav, as opposed to Rabbi Yirmiyah. According to Rabbi Abba in the name of Rav, Kam Dina. Kam Dina means that since Bezdin already awarded half of the nechasim of the deceased Reuven to the Yavam Shimon. Again, Shimon is a Safek Yavam. Right, the other half was taken by the Safek. Kam Dina. That's gone. That's history. Which means that when Shimon dies, the Yavam, and he has Vadei B'nei Banim, they have a right to tell the Safek to pack his bags. Until you prove that you're an Ach, you can't even get one portion of the estate of our father. I don't know if it's your father, but our father, namely Shimon. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Hadar Dina. We got to start from scratch, which means that if the brothers, Vadei B'nei Banim of Shimon, are telling the Safek, look, buddy, your father was Reuven. We're now dividing up the estate of our father Shimon. So at that point, the Safek turns around and says to the Achim, if you admit that I'm the son of Reuven, your feta, your uncle, then fork over half of Reuven's estate that was transferred by the Bezdin to the possession of Shimon, your father, because that half of the estate doesn't belong to your father. It belongs to me because I'm the son of Reuven. And the Yibum was just a bluff, so to speak. The Gemara is now analyzing a machlokes Tanoim in the Mishnah at the end of Ksubis, recording a machlokes between the Tanakama, the Chachamim, and Admon. Very strange name, but Admon. And the Gemara wants to say the machlokes Amoraim here between Rabbi Abba in the name of Rav and Rabbi Yirmiyah is really an ancient machlokes between the Chachamim and Admon. What's the case? This man, Misha Holach Limedina Sayam. The of the lo derech sadeu. So a person owned a sada, and that sada was surrounded on all sides by sados, by fields that are owned by others. However, they worked out a deal of what's called a derech. Do you see where it says here, the of the lo derech sadeu? Derech means that the owners of the fields that surround his field agreed that there would be a derech which would make it accessible for him, the one who owns the middle field, to get access to his field. But now of the Lord derech, we don't know where that derech is. So he says over here, lo derech shel vilo l'sadeu bein sado sehen. V'holach l'medina sayom k'shechazar of the lo aderech el sadeu. He no longer remembers. Let's say he was in China for a year, doing import and export, and now he comes back, and lo and behold, he doesn't remember where exactly was that derech. And he has monetary rights to that derech. Is Admon Omar. Now, in order to appreciate this machlokes between Admon and the Chachamim, we have to assume that there is a derech, there is a road. I don't know if it's a paved road, but let's call it a paved road, just for the fun of it. But we're not sure if that's the road that our friend who went to Medina Sayyam, who has the inner field, is his road. Does he have rights to that road? Kavlo derech. Now imagine north, east, south, and west. There are many different ruchos, what we call in Hebrew, directions from which he could enter into his field. And each one of the Baalei Asados says that you didn't have rights to go through my field. Go to this other guy. It's his field that you had a derech, not my field. Now, one possibility is to say that in this scenario, since we'll call him Reuven comes back from Medina Sayyam, he doesn't know where his derech is. He's out in the cold. He can't prove in any litigation against any one of the neighbors in the surrounding fields that that neighbor is the one who hosted his derech. He now has to start from scratch. He's got to buy a new derech. He may have to pave a new road. But then again, even if he paves a new road, he's got to get rights to do so. He may have to pay for those rights. And that's the shittas of the Chacham. The Chacham say, sorry, buddy, if you don't know where your derech is, you can't even come to Beis Din and claim anything. What are you going to claim? That you had a derech. Yeah, but where? Which side? North, south, east, west? Which field were you going to? And Admon disagrees. Admon Omer Yelech B'Ktsara. Now, Ktsara again means the shortest road. So again, let's give a literal translation of the Gemara, the way Rashi does, and we'll have to wait until the Gemara clarifies this. But just in a general sense, Admon Omar Yelech B'Ktsara, he can force the other Baalei Asados that have the surrounding Sados to give him a derech. He once owned a derech, and he could sue the entire hekev of his field, meaning all the Sados that surrounded, almost like a union, because one of you gave me a derech. And now you have to give me another derech to replace the first one, because ours is nevad v'nishka. We don't know where is that derech and so forth. However, they have a right to give him a derech ktsara. You see, on the one hand, Admon's shita is intuitively correct. The man owned a derech. We can't find it. You have to guarantee me a derech. Find a derech. You want to give me the cheapest and the shortest derech? It's not paved. I don't know what. Fine, but you got to supply me with a derech. I have no way to get to my field, and I own the derech. It's lost. Give me a derech. But I think the weak point in Admon, and that's what I think led the Chacham to reject Admon, is that how do you have rights to address the entire group of all the Bali Asados when you had a derech only in one of those sados?
And therefore he's got no.
And that's going to be the Chachamim. So again, let's go over it one more time. Admon is saying he has a claim to the entire group. And therefore, he's not Motzi Mechavel Raya. There is a clear-cut Raya that supports his claim. There definitely, and no one denies it, there was a road. Cough it up, give me a road. You want to give me the cheapest road? Give me the cheapest road, but give me a pair of bones, some sort of a derech. I had one and I want it back. But the Chachamim are objecting to Admon because who gives you a right to address all the Bali Asados? You had a specific road. That road is lost. Wherever it is, we don't know where it is. Now, buy a new road. Let's negotiate. To the highest bidder. Or actually, in this case, to the lowest bidder. You follow what I mean? Which one of the Bali Asados is willing to take a minimum price for a minimum road?
What do we say in Western Haver? You say, yeah, I might have was a road there. I just don't know through whose field it was. But then do you say Western Haver?
So I think that's the machlokas. Admon and Chachama. Admon is saying, what do you mean I'm Motzi Mechavel Raya? You all agree that I had a derech. But the Chachamim say, okay, but where was it there? And each one could push him off to the next neighbor. Reuven, okay, I don't want to call him Reuven because Reuven is the guy who had them. So let's call it Shimon. Shimon says to Reuven, you have a tvi against Levi. I know that Levi had them. Levi says, no, it was Reuven, it was Shimon who had them. And it goes on and on. Chachamim omrim yikach derech b'mei amana. He's got to pay the full price for a derech. Oh, Yifrach ba'avra, let him fly a kite. Yeah, this is the makor for flying a kite. It's right here in the Gemara. Yifrach ba'avra. But really what he means not to fly a kite. Let's be honest about it. He means to fly over all the fields and land in his field. That would be pretty clever. What's that called? Skydiving? I forget what it's called. You see it at the beach sometimes. They fly, they surf, and then the wind carries them up. That's how you're going to have to get to your field. Take a quick course in skydiving. Or pay mea mana, which is a hefty sum to buy a new road. Now we want to analyze this machlokas between the Chacham and Admon. And we raise the following problem. Rabbanan, how is it possible that they could lock out Reuven from a derech? Shimon Komer Admon. Admon is absolutely right. There was definitely a derech. He had a vadai derech. He had ownership rights on a derech. How can you undermine those rights? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Hachavai Askira Kon Shekifua Arba Bnei Adam Arba Ruchos. There are 4 field owners that surround his field, Reuven's field, from 4 different directions. And therefore each one has a right to push him off, like we said before. If you, Reuven, come to Shimon, Shimon's going to say go to Levi. Then Levi's going to say go to Yehuda or go back to Shimon. It wasn't through my field that you had it there. If that's the reality, and that's the scenario, then how could Admon counter against the logic of that. It's very forceful logic. How could Admon say we have to come up with a field with a road thing? We have to work it out amongst ourselves. His claim is to find the original road. And the Chachamim say to Admon, look, he can't find his original road. And no one's willing to admit that it was through my field that you had an original road. And we can push them back and forth one to the other. And this is called Kol Echad V'Echad Yachal L'Tchosa. Each one of them could push him off. So how does Admon counter against, this is a very interesting sugya because it's like a ping pong ball or a tennis ball that goes from one court to the other. Initially we think that Admon is definitely correct. He had a vada field, cough up a field thing. Now we think the Chachamim are right because there were 4 sados on 4 different sides for Arba Ruchos. Each one is docha him to the next shachem, to the next neighbor. So how do we understand Admon? Omar Rava bi'arba di asu mikoach arba. Let's read another line because I think it'll shed a light. V'arba di asu mikoach ha. Ki pli b'chadi asi mikoach arba. What happens? Initially, there were 4 neighbors. Each one respectively owned a different sada that surrounds Reuben's sada in the middle. But at some point, one of the 4 neighbors bought out the other neighbors. That's called in the Lashon HaShas, Chad di Asi Mikoach Arba. He bought up the rights to all the fields around this central field inside. Now, Admon makes logical sense. Again, we'll see the Chacham make logical sense too. But let's go through Admon first. Admon says, look, my friend, you bought up all the rights to all the surrounding fields. Included in what you bought is not only a schus mamon, but also a chavas mamon. You memela bought up the obligation to cough up a field, what do you call it, a derech, a road. Because now you're the proud owner of all the fields that surround me. We don't know where my original road was, but I definitely had a road somewhere in within the 4 fields. Now you're the owner of all 4 fields. Cough up a road for me. I don't have to pay for it. Nobody denies that I own the road. The Chachamim say, wait a minute. When this individual, again, we'll call him Yehuda. When Yehuda buys up the fields of, let's say, Shimon and Levi, okay, actually, it's Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, B'Sachar, and now we're up to Zvulun. Okay, so Zvulun buys up the 4. He buys up the rights, the monetary rights of each one of the individual owners. And it was the right of each individual owner to deny, to be doche to the other shachem, to deny that the field, that the road went through his field. That's called chadi asi mikoach arba adman savar matzi amar le mikamakom darchi gabachu. Reuven could claim to Zvulun, if we call him that no matter how you slice the cake, you have to admit that I had a road to one of the fields, through one of the fields, and you have that field now. You're the proud owner of the field which is undefined. I mean, we can't specify, but you now bought the field. Again, I don't know if it's Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, or Yisachar's field, but one of those four fields that you bought I had rights to a road. You can't uproot me from my rights to a road. Rabbanan Savri, the Amar Le. The buyer, we call him Zvulun, turns to Reuben and he says, look, Ishaskis, Shaskis. The Ilo, Madrina Shtar Lamari, Velomatzis/Tuye Dina Badai. If you drop your claim for a field that after court, right, Zvulun is now speaking, and there's a claim against him that is he has to fork over a derech. If you drop your claim, you know what? I'll give you a good deal. I'll sell you a road below market price as a gesture of goodwill that you dropped your claim that I owe you a field. When I say field, I mean a derech, a road. But you know what? Elo, if you're not willing to play ball with me, if you want to insist on your claim against me, you know what? Madrid and Shtar Lamare. I'm going to take that document, the bill of sale, as we call it, from which I purchased all of the other, sodos, and I'll give it back to their owners. I'm going to just revert back to the original situation. You can't claim against anybody because anyone you claim against, they're going to throw you to the next one. So basically, what the Gemara is saying, according to Tanakh, according to Chachamim, this situation in Bezdin of Reuven is quite desperate. Because even though Zvulun bought up all the other fields, that the fields of Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, nevertheless, Zvulun has the upper hand here in Bezdin. Why? Because if you're going to insist on the claim that I, meaning Zvulun the buyer, have to afford you with a derech, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to return the star back to its owner. And once it goes back to the original owner, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, you're out in the cold. You get nothing.
Why would you go back to before figures out he bought the land because he wants to himself?
He says the following. Madriino shtor lemarayu achzir es shtoros hamachir li arba habaylim hakodmim. Right, that's Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar. Lo tuchal lamod imam bidin litfor mehem es haderech ki kol echad yitchos chayes havera. You're going to have to pay top price for a derech. No one's going to sell you for a cheap price. I'm willing to sell you for a cheap price. Why? Because I want to work out this deal so that I can remain an owner and not have to undermine the purchases of the other four fields. So for that, I'm willing to break a deal with you, cut you a deal, and say to you, you know what? I'll give you a very fine derech, and you'll pay me a pittance. You pay me a symbolic a token. But drop your claim for a derech, because I'm threatening you. I have something over your head. I have an albatross around your neck. If you don't play ball with me, Now again, would the other field owners have to agree to, to undermine or disqualify, the shtaros? I don't know. That we'll have to see. So again, initially, we really, really empathize with the opinion of Admon, because no matter how you slice the cake, Zvulun bought the field in which, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Reuven had rights to a derech. Where it is, I can't point it out. But you owe him a derech, because you're now the proud owner of all the fields around my field. That's Admon. Admon, in a sense, is saying something that's glatt, straight, without bending it this way or that way. There are no bumps on the road. You own, now you're the proud owner of a field, and I had a derech and monetary rights to that derech. You got to call for them. Admon makes a lot of sense. But the Chachamim come up with a dray, you know what I mean? Around the back. And they can threaten him and say, look, drop your claim. I'll sell you a field, cheap field. Like when you put a fence around the property to protect the property, or sometimes to protect children if the property is near a public, highway or whatever. So you can make a fence out of the cheapest material in the world, and it might do the job, bare bones. Or you can make a beautiful, hedges, and you pay a gardener, on a weekly basis to come and cut the hedges. Or you can put up a steel wall. There are many different levels. So now the Chachamim say to Admon, let the buyer provide the cheapest bare bones derech to Reuven, so that he has access to his field, that he doesn't have to take a helicopter, because if Reuven doesn't agree to the terms of Zvulun, this buyer, then Zvulun has the power. Again, we're not sure exactly that. We have to fine tune how that works. That's what David's problem is. But we'll solve that problem. I can return the situation to what it was before I purchased the field. Every one of the buyers would be more than happy to get back his field. Let's say there was an increase in the real estate, like here in Israel. I always cry about this. The real estate in Israel seems to be constantly going up. I don't know when the balloon is going to burst. So let's say the value of the sados went up. I'm just giving you a hypothetical scenario. So the sellers, meaning Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, would be more than happy to back out of the deal and get their sados back. But for Reuven, that's not good news, because then Reuven has to really buy a new field, because otherwise each one of the four field owners, is going to push you from one to the other. You'll never be able to prove where your rights landed, where you have real rights to a road. So that's the opinion of the Chachamim, called Ishaskus. If you'll be quiet. Oh, now we get back to Rabbi Abba in the name of Rav and Rabbi Yirmiyah. Again, we got so excited about the machlokas and the dialectic here about how to understand the Chacham and Admon, we forgot why we were learning Sufis now. We want to know whether Hadar Dina or Kam Dina. Lema, says the Gemara, Rabbi Abba di'amar ke'Rabbanan, Rabbi Yirmiyah di'amar ke'Admon. Rabbi Abba's logic is equal to that of the Rabbanan. Rabbanan say you're not going to get it there. Why? Because Kfar Kam Dine. What does it mean, Kfar Kam Dine? How does the Gemara link Rabbi Abba in the name of Rav with the Rabbanan? And the answer is, Kam Dine means that already at the moment that Reuven comes to claim, I want my derech back, my lost derech. At that moment, we already have a psak din. And the psak din is that Reuven is going to have to pay top dollar 100 mana to get himself a derech, because each one of the owners is pushing him back. And the Rabbanan say, come dine, even though subsequently Zvulun bought out all these 4 field owners, but nevertheless, come dine, we already have a ruling which obligates Reuven to buy his own derech from scratch, top price. Rabbi Yirmiyah Diyama Kadmo. Rabbi Yirmiyah says Hadar Dine. Forget about what our psak din was relevant then under the assumptions that we were operating with at that moment in time. Now we have a whole different set of assumptions. Now our assumption is that Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar can no longer push off Reuven. Why? Because they're out of the picture now. They've been replaced by one buyer, namely Zvulun. And against Zvulun, as Adman points out, there's a brilliant claim here of Reuven to a field, because however you slice the cake, you Zvulun are the proud owner of a field that contains my derech. So that's called Hadar Dinah. Again, let's go over Kam Dinah. That's, I think, the more challenging one. The Tlut. Tlut is a Hebrew word for interdependence. The interdependence of Rabbi Abba and Admon. I'm sorry, Rabbi Abba in the name of Rav and the Chacham. And that's based on the principle of Kam Dinah. What's Kam Dinah? Kam Dinah is that whatever assumption we were working with at the time of the psak, based on Hilchos Feikas, that psak remains untouched. It cannot be undermined. And since before Zvulun brought up the other 4 field owners, the other 4 shchenim, we had ruled completely against the interest of Reuven. That ruling stands, even though now it's no longer in suffix, because now Zvulun bought up all the other 4 field owners. There's no longer a suffix. We know that Zvulun is holding on to the derech of Reuven, but it doesn't matter. We've already established, that's called Kam Dinah, the rights. Well, let me say it in the negative sense, the afkas zchus of Reuven. We were mafkia the zchus of Reuven. So the Gemara says no. How are we doing on the clock? All right, we have another few minutes. Rabbi Abba, don't push me against the wall with an interdependence between my shita and that of the Rabbanan. I'm gonna square off with Adma. Ad kan lo k'omar Adman Hasam. When did Abba say? When did Admon say that now that Zvulun brought up the other 4 properties, Reuven has an absolute right to demand a derech? Elamishum di'omer lei. That's only because Reuven has a right to say mimanafsha. Here we turn to Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. Mimanafsha darchi chad gabah. I have a derech that's in your field. Somewhere. Now you have one field that surrounds my field. I had a derech. Avol hacha, but in the case of the suffix in the B'nai Yavam, and the Yavam died and then dividing up his estate, mi ikal meimar hach. Here even Admon would agree that Mikol Meimar Hachi, V'chi efshar lo mashiyech lasafik eines bari al chelik mesuyim shal Yerusha, harei einu yodea bevadai im ben hames Oh, Ben Hayavam, who is he? Elababa Taina Shemagilo Chelik Birusha Mimanasha. Oh, Shiachziru lo Mechzasa Minichse Meshinot, oh, Shiitnu Chelik Shabbat Be'Barim Zon. But Khan, Af Admon Yoda Shekom Dine. Why? Shekaven Shabbat Mikoch Shtei Tainos Chain Safe. Omer Lo Al Kol Taina Tavi Raya. Even Sheba Mikoch Shtei Tainos Shein Safe. Right. So again, Admon's logic is compelling. There's a mimanashah here. No matter how you slice the cake, I don't care where the road was, whether it's north, south, east, or west. You certainly owe me a road, Mr. Buyer, meaning Zvulun. Okay. I took a halt for a second. That's a pun. So now, that's Admon. But here, in the case of the Suffolk and the Bnei Yavam, the Suffolk has to come up with two different arguments, each one which is a Suffolk. He's going to say it like this. If I'm the son of the deceased, we call him Ruvain, then half of the Nechasim, the estate of Ruvain that was taken over by Shimon, the Yavam, belongs to me. But you don't want to agree to that. So you're going to only give me a portion of the Yerusha as an ach. And you're going to claim, well, you're not the surviving son of Ruvain. You're the son of our father Shimon. You're a brother. You get a chayil. So there's no clear-cut mimarashav. He's really putting together two tainas, each of which is a suffix. He has one taina based on a suffix that maybe he's the son of Reuben, another taina based on the suffix maybe he's the son of Shimon and he deserves one of the portions as a brother. But he doesn't have one single taina that is absolutely convincing without any doubt and certain. It's purely certain that he has rights to this property. In Admon's case, he has an absolute right to this derech. Why? Because if that is not one iota where the derech was that was lost, Zvulun, the buyer, has to provide him with a field, with a derech. So I don't have to introduce Kam Dine in order to explain Admon. Admon is based on a powerful mimanashah that's absolutely binding and convincing.
It's only the case that he bought all the fourth.
Right, I'm talking. That's the case. You want to come up with another case? I'm willing to take it, but we're dealing with the case where Zvulun bought up Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, V'Yisachar, all four fields. So the claim of Admon, meaning the claim of Reuven according to Admon, is stark. It's invincible. It's absolute. There's no element of suffix in the equation. Says Rabbi Abba, just 1 second. Right, we're talking about Rabbi Abba now. Let me just make sure I got the names right. Yeah. Says Rabbi Abba, Admon, according to Admon, right. According to Rabbi Abba, Admon could admit to my position called Kam Dine. That's what Rabbi Abba is saying now, which means that, sorry, Mr. Safek, we already awarded half of the estate of Reuven to Shimon. Now you're coming up with another claim based on the fact that you want to get a portion in Shimon's estate when Shimon dies. But then you're coming up with a new argument, which is a suffix. Why is that argument, which is a suffix, any better than the original argument that you put forth, which is a suffix, on the basis of which we divided the estate of Reuven into two halves, in which you, the suffix, got half, and Shimon got the other half? That's called Kam Dine. Says Rabbi Abba, I am going to insist on waving the flag of Kam Dine. And why? Because the other taina that he's coming up with now after the death of Shimon is a suffix taina. Oh, I'm the son of Shimon. That's what the suffix is now saying. And if I get an equal portion when you distribute the estate of Shimon, that's a suffix. Admon will not apply the principle of Kam Dine in a case where he has a taina of Mimonash, a real, full, lasted taina of Mimonash. Let's just see, I know we're over time now, just one more little piece. Rabbi Yirmiyah Omar, right, it was Rabbi Yirmiyah who said, let's just get it down, Hadar Dine, right, Hadar Dine, on Amid Aleph, Ano Ami Afil Rabban, I can be reconciled with the Rabban. Rabbanan had a svar called Ichastis. You better play games with me, otherwise I'm going to change the facts on the ground. Is Adkan lo kami Rabbanan hasam elamishum diamale Ishaskis shaskis vi lo madrina shtar lemare. Lo matzis lishtu yedina badayu ravel hacha. In this case of the Bnei Yavam, there's no Ishaskis. And therefore, Hadar Dine, according to Rabbi Yirmiyah. Hadar Dine means we have to go back to square one and start from the beginning, in which case we have to consider all the different possibilities of the suffix, and we have to redivide the property with a new distribution of the estate. When did the Rabbanan say that Ki'ilu Kam Dine, we can't, revert back to the old situation? That's only when we have the Svar Vishastas, meaning when the buyer, we call him Zvulun, has the upper hand. He can threaten Reuven if he's not willing to play ball with him and take give him a cheap deal on a road, on an inferior quality road. If he's not willing to play ball with him, then he says, Ishaskas Hadra, what's the language? Hadra Shtarola Marayu. I'm out of here. I'm going to just give back the Shtaros, and each one of the four, neighbors will get back their Shtaros, get back their lands. And again, you're going to be pushed from one to the other, and you have no claim. So this is where we'll stop for today. We're up to Safek v'Yavam, Shebo lachlok b'nichsei Sava. Okay, that's a whole nother dimension here. So we're on Daf Lamed Ches Amid Aleph, and we're how many lines down from the top? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down from the top. Okay, then. So I wish you all a great day. Thank you so much. Wow, we covered a lot today, both in Nida and in Yevamot.